I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's STEM Talk, an online series for aerospace families brought to you by fellow aerospace experts. I'm Leanne McGinley from Corporate Communications, and as part of our Aerospace STEM Talk team, we are excited to bring you this week's STEM Talk. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Jackie Cardiff, a mechanical engineer in the Small Satellite Production Engineering Group in XLab here at Aerospace. And today she will begin by giving a brief introduction of CubeSats, specifically Aerospace's fleet of CubeSats. And Aerospace has been a major player in the CubeSat community from its inception and currently has 25 operational satellites in orbit. Today's discussion will cover general CubeSat design as well as some of the Aerospace's CubeSats. Jackie, welcome. We are so excited to have you here with us today, and I'm turning it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Leanne. So as she very kindly introduced me, my name is Jackie. I'm a mechanical engineer in our small satellite team here. I've been with the company since 2014, where I graduated from the University of Michigan. So I'm still relatively new in terms of aerospace terms, and also still, in the beginning of my aerospace career. So I'll just jump right in. So today I'm going to go over CubeSats, very basic. What are they? What can they do? I'm sure a lot of you out there have heard of CubeSats, at least somewhat. Some of you may be more familiar, especially if you've got some students that are a little bit older. Pick up some new information along the way. I'm also going to be, quizzing you guys a little bit, asking you some questions, what you guys can figure out on your own. So be aware, be awake for that. I'm also then going to go into CubeSats at the beginning. So how did CubeSats come about? What was their purpose when they first started? And then more recently here at Aerospace, what we have been doing to kind of develop and continue the work on CubeSats. So as Leanne said, we have 25 operational satellites right now. So that's not a small amount. We've got quite a bit going on. So after that, we're going to go into delivery, deployment, and ground stations. Making a satellite is cool. At least I think so, and it takes a lot of work. So you want to make sure you can actually get it to space and then communicate with it with ground station. And as Leanne said, feel free to ask questions. Lauren, our moderator, will direct them to me throughout the presentation. But be aware that I'm going to be asking you guys questions too. So I'll be looking for those answers in the chat window. All right, and then over here on the right, you can see this is my coworker, Michael. He's also a mechanical engineer. And what's unique about Aerospace is our engineers will do the design work, but then we're actually the ones to put it together. To see him with his special gloves, and this is the framework of one of our CubeSats. All right, so first thing we're going to go through is I actually have a quick little video for you. And it's going to go really fast. So when I say quick, I mean it, literally. And let's see if you guys can kind of think about and figure out what's going on here. Kind of like a little shooter there. Can I see in the comments if any of you guys have any idea what that might be? So I'll play it again. I know it goes pretty quick, and it's a little blurry, but you can see the Earth here in the background. What looks like a kind of flower-shaped thing, and then these guys kind of shoot out. So yeah, Leanne, you're right. It's shooting out of the CubeSat. So this is how we actually deploy them into space. This is one of our CubeSats from before, and you can see right here, this is one satellite. Oh, sorry, I don't have my pointer on here. If you guys can see my mouse, this is one satellite, and then there's another one here. This is a joined one, and then as they move out, you'll see there starts to be a little bit of separation. So they have little springs that separate them from each other. And the satellite you saw there was actually this one, which we call ISARA. So if you're in space industry or work with military at all, you'll get very used to acronyms. So we like to name our things cool words or names, but they actually, each of the letters mean something related to that project. So ISAR means Integrated Solar Array Reflect Array. So that's referring to this device here. So that was folded down along the sides of the satellite when it deployed, and it's got solar cells on the other side. And then this is our what we call a 3 view. So this is one of our largest satellites, and throughout the video, you're going to see this little tissue box show up. That's because it's the best way to kind of show you guys, when I'm not in person in front of you with models, how big these actually are. So this is to scale. So if you were to take this tissue box and put it next to it, about 3 of these next to each other, 3 tissue boxes, would be the size of the satellite, or maybe like a loaf of bread. So consider that that's one of our largest satellites. As we go through, you'll see they're actually, most of them are smaller than that. The size of the tissue box are smaller. All right, so what is a CubeSat? I'm going to compare what a general CubeSat is to something you may have heard about, the James Webb Telescope. Now, the James Webb Telescope is the next cool, Hubble-ish telescope. It's highly specialized, very expensive, takes a long time to work on, but it kind of demonstrates this new shift that came about when CubeSats were developed, just the idea of them. So the first big difference you'll see is the size. If you look at the pictures on the right, this one at the top is a picture from NASA, James Webb Telescope, and you'll see you've got 2 people here. These are full people, in their smocks and gowns to keep everything clean, but this guy needs a lift or a ladder in order to reach the top part. So this, whole satellite can be, the size of a car, size of a bus, really, really large. CubeSats, as I mentioned, size of the tissue box or maybe a loaf of bread, and we tend to talk about their size in terms of unit. And that unit is referred to as is a 10 by 10 by 10 centimeter cube, hence the name Cube Satellite. But that's kind of hard to imagine in my head, so that's why I go with tissue box. And on the bottom right here, you can see these are actually 2 different, or they're the same satellite, but 2 satellites here, the same one, just twice. And you see a person's hand next to it. So it fits in the palm of your hand, pretty small compared to this guy. So that's a big difference when we're talking about CubeSats. And the next is the cost. These numbers might be a little out of date, but the message remains. James Webb Telescope can, at the time was estimated to cost $25 billion, whereas a single Cube satellite can cost, $1 to $5 million, depending on how specialized it is, what equipment it uses. But that's a huge reduction in cost, which is great for a lot of different people. Next is the time frame. So the James Webb Telescope, can take 25 years, possibly longer, to develop and launch into space. So when we talk about time frame, what I'm referring to is start time is, hey, we have this cool idea for a satellite. And then end time is that satellite has just been put into orbit and it's starting to be used. So 25 years for James Webb Telescope. So think about that. We didn't even have, cell phones at all, let alone smartphones 25 years ago. So what type of how to date is their technology they're putting in this when they started so long ago? With CubeSat, you can do a new mission every 1 to 2 years if you wanted. It's really a much faster turnaround time. So I want to, ask you guys, what are your thoughts? What would you do with a satellite this small? Why do you think we started as an industry thinking about small satellites rather than just going bigger and, essentially some people might consider better? Why did we go smaller? So I see some responses here. Cheaper to build and launch, that's definitely a big one. Possibly to get closer to the object you want to study or move through the atmosphere more easily. That's definitely true. We want to be able to service some of these really expensive satellites, maybe with some smaller ones that are not quite as expensive, use them as a tool, not just as their own satellite, but use them to help out with other things in space. Cost is definitely a big one. I think that one from James is supposed to say tech demonstration or something like that. And yeah, from Nancy, can update quicker. So yeah, if you have this new technology you want to try out, you can just put it up really quickly. You don't have to wait, a couple of decades to see if it's actually going to work. And that helps the whole industry grow much more rapidly. So yeah, great answers.
And
we'll kind of touch. Yes.
Is the CubeSat considered a spacecraft even though it is so small?
Yes, it is. It is a fully operational satellite, and I'm going to go into what that actually means. So in terms of a satellite that, humans put up and work with, and there are some requirements for that. So it's a very good question because I'm going to cover it in just a couple of slides. But yes, they are considered, full satellites, full spacecraft. So to touch on Oops. So to touch on what you guys kind of answered, size is one thing. You know, you can put them up quicker. You can have one rocket with, you know, tens to, you know, 100 of these small guys, and so you don't have to send up a huge rocket every time, and you can send up more rockets into different orbits. Cost. A big thing with cost here is this opens up space. So many more people. There are tons of universities that have teams where, you know, if the students listening here, you know, you go to school, you can just hop on a team and start working on something that's actually going to go into space. And from my own experience in the labs at Aerospace, and then also on a project team myself in college, that's where I learned the most, was actually hands-on physically doing something, physically breaking something and realizing, oh, it's not the way to do it. So that's a great way to open it up to universities and students. Even some high schools in the country have started doing beginning CubeSat programs. Another thing is certain companies that couldn't afford to can now in the past can now go into space, and even some countries that, you know, weren't like the U.S. at the forefront of the space race. I know there's some countries in Africa that now they have a space program because they can afford to put up these satellites, and that's great for their economy and just the national pride as a whole. And it helps the space industry all together because we all learn from each other. And time, as someone mentioned in the comments, you can try out new things much more quickly, and because they're cheaper and they go up so quickly, if you mess up, it's not as big of a deal as this $25 billion satellite. You know, you can try something out, even if you're not 100% sure it's going to work. You still want to be pretty sure, but you can learn from that failure or that success. You don't have to be, you know, so risk adverse. You know, you can take risks with these satellites. And then here you can see, oh, and someone mentioned, you know, different missions, different science missions is a big one. We can go to different places because, you know, it costs more in fuel and in money the bigger the thing is you're trying to put up into space. And here's, you know, our little tissue box back, and you can see that these are all 1-unit satellites, and they fit pretty much exactly the same size as a tissue box. All right, so what can satellites do? This is one really cool picture we have from one of our satellites. We call it AeroCube 4, as we have the very original name. We name our satellites Aero for Aerospace, and then Cube for CubeSat. So you'll see me say AC4, AeroCube 4, 5, 6, you know, as we go through. But AeroCube 4, launched in 2012, has collected and downloaded over 8,000 images in the first 3 years of operation. So one of the coolest ones we got here was this shot of an eclipse. And I can highlight here, if you can't see it or you didn't notice it right away, this right here, see that black spot? That is the eclipse shadow on the Earth. So you can see something that, you know, is really cool from Earth side, you know, to see the eclipse happen, but then from space, it looks so different, and you really get the sense of, yeah, that is a shadow. Something's casting a shadow on Earth, which, you know, doesn't happen every day. So things like that are really cool to see with these spacecraft. All right, so I'm going to go through kind of the beginning, and to go back to that question that was asked, you know, that was also a question that was asked about CubeSats in general when they started. You know, are these actually going to be satellites? You know, are they going to be able to function as satellites on their own? So what they first had to figure out was, well, what does a satellite need to function? And I'm going to go through these different kind of sections that a satellite needs in order to work and to operate as a satellite. Because think about this, started back in early 2000s, you know, 2001, when CubeSats were first conceived, and then when they started to pick up more recently, but in the last, you know, decade. But back then, again, to compare with cell phones, we didn't have smartphones. So saying that we could just assume satellites could be this small because the technology is there was not correct. You really didn't know. We had to miniaturize a lot of things that hadn't been done before. And by we, I mean the aerospace industry as a whole, not just the Aerospace Corporation. So here I have an example here. This is one of our satellites. It is what we call AeroCube 7, and it has one of those cool acronym names again, OCSD, which is Optical Communication and Sensor Demonstration. And this is the tissue box in comparison to it. So about 1.5 tissue boxes size. So I'm going to go through these different sections. So first, you need power. That could be batteries, that could be solar cells. Here you can see on the side, we've got a little wing that will end up popping out. You'll see a video of this later showing how those wings open up. but we have solar cells on the side, and those are there in order to charge our batteries because you can't do anything without power. Next is communication with the ground. So you've got a satellite up there, that's great, but if you can't talk to it and tell it to do things or talk to it in order to get the pictures or the data back from the satellite, it's just kind of like a brick floating around. So on this one, we have this medium gain comm antenna, and that's what this little patch here is. That's this guy. And then there are other options. You can have an RF radio like we do here. You can have laser communication, which is also on this satellite, and different things to talk down to Earth. And there's always experimenting with different ways of doing that. Next is what we call attitude knowledge. So a lot of you might be familiar with the word attitude in a much different way. When we talk about spacecraft, attitude means how you're facing, which way are you oriented. So we need to know, is this side facing Earth, or is it flipped around and it's facing the sun? There's 3 different ways it could be spinning around and moving throughout its orbit. So we need to know what that is. And there are a bunch of different ways to figure that out. We also need to know where it is in its orbit, and that's where things like GPS come in. So a couple things we can have here, and this is one that you'll have a lot of sensors for, is what's called a sun sensor. So we have one of these on each faces of our satellites. So if the sun is over here, it'll light up a sensor on this side. If it's over here, it'll light up a sensor on this side. And that tells us immediately which side is facing the sun. And since we know where we are in the orbit, that can tell us which way we're rotated. Similarly, with this Earth horizon sensor, which is also on the back side of the satellite, it can tell you exactly where the horizon of the Earth is, and that can give you another indicator of which way you're pointed and to what degree you're pointed up from the Earth or down towards the Earth.
And we have another
GPS
question,
sensor?
Jackie.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do these use miniature FEEP thrusters for attitude and station keeping?
Good question. So, propulsion is one way of doing things like your orientation in the right spot, which is what is the next point on here, which is actually attitude control. So actually, let me just go to that, and then that way I'll have some things to show you. So, I'll put a pause on that question so I can get through this, and then I will show you exactly what we're talking about in terms of thrusters. Another attitude knowledge, so you can also refer to it as navigation, is star trackers. Basically, these act kind of like a map for when you're in space. So if I take a picture of the sky, being space with all the stars around it, we have these star charts and star maps that we can kind of coordinate. We can look at that piece of sky and say, oh, that's that star, and that's that star, and now I know which way I'm facing. So star trackers are really important. And next, to go with your question, so attitude control. While propulsion is an option, and we do have propulsion on this one, it's not ideal for some of these satellites. So you kind of have to look about and consider what the mission is and what the point is of your satellite. What are you trying to gain from this mission? In this case, for AC7, propulsion was one of our experiments. And in this instance, we used steam. So we just had a little bit of water, heated up, and then it kind of puffed out of the spacecraft. And that was enough to kind of move it around. And you'll see kind of its movements that we're planning to do with it. And we have performed with it in a later slide. I've got a little animation showing what we want to do with those thrusters. But to answer your direct question, which was, do you use these small thrusters in order to do station keeping and to move it around, to turn it the way you want? Typically, we don't. So the reason for that is when you have thrusters, you're limited with your propellant. So you have to have a tank on board somewhere, something that you can expel, and that gets used up. So if you need a large tank in order to last a long lifetime, then you need more space in your satellite. And then you have less room for other things. And considering how small these are, that's really difficult. So there have been things like you mentioned, those really tiny thrusters, and those are, in the stages of being applied. But most of the time, because we're in low Earth orbit, we can get away with some reaction wheels, so conservation of angular momentum. There's little wheels inside that spin up really fast, and that can turn your satellite. And then also torque rods, or sometimes torque coils. In our case, we use torque rods right now, where they create a dipole, and then that kind of turns the satellite because the dipole wants to match up with the Earth's magnetic field. So since we're in low Earth orbit, we can use those two things, and we don't have to rely on propulsion. We can also, if we want to slow down or speed up in our orbit, we can turn our satellite so that it's drag heavy, where we have the wings out and we're kind of, it's like when you stick your hand out the car window when you're driving and you put it flat up, then you get a lot of pressure against you. If you put it sideways, then you get not a lot of drag on your hand. So we can use things like that. The long answer is short. Yes, they have been used, I'm sure, on CubeSats, and they're going to be continued to be explored, but it's not the main way we use this. Especially in terms of station keeping, these satellites don't last very long because they're considered, low cost. You don't go through and make sure every little thing is super safe for radiation. They're going to be low Earth orbit. You're going to get stuff that's going to degrade over time. So, and depending on your orbit, you might, burn up in the atmosphere, within 6 months. So you don't need station keeping because your mission isn't reliant on being up there for years and years and years. Hopefully that answered your question.
Another question is, what about electric propulsion?
Yeah, that's definitely an area that is increasing in interest and increasing in capability. So there have been experiments with getting it on CubeSats. Again, the problem is getting it small enough. But there are a couple of companies, I know one that came out of MIT that started in the last few years, and they're working on that type of thing to put it in CubeSats. The other thing I think about with propulsion in terms of, even electric propulsion or more traditional propulsions is they put out a plume, right? There's some gas or there's something coming out of them. That's how you get what you want, that motion forward. So if I've got, something here, but I've got a cool camera here and stuff spraying out of my propulsion system, it can either, spray in front of what I want to take a picture, it could get onto our camera lenses and then the camera is no longer usable. So that's another kind of drawback to it. It's not to say they're not useful, hey, put the thruster on one side and put the camera on the other side of the satellite. So yes, it is coming up in CubeSats especially, but not specifically, it's not like a standard thing that's on all CubeSats.
And we have a few more questions. What protects the communication antenna from burning up?
Well, we don't actually, when it burns up in the atmosphere, the whole satellite burns up. So that's at the end of life. We kind of just let it go. It burns up in the atmosphere, and by that point, the satellite kind of dies. So radiation is very, harmful, and eventually, throughout its life, the radiation will make the glass on the solar cells kind of more opaque, and so you won't get as much power in. Maybe it's gotten a little too cold or too hot for batteries, so they don't last as long. So eventually, your satellite will die, which is, a sad day, but hopefully you've gotten a lot of good data out of it. And then it'll fall back to Earth, and it'll burn up in the atmosphere. If you're asking about when it goes up into space, we go up in rockets, which I'll show you at the end of the presentation, an example of that. And we're protected just like, your astronauts would be or another satellite would be on the way out of the atmosphere. So short answer is they don't get protected. Everything kind of burns up at the end of its lifetime. Another question,
and
Lauren?
How long can a cube? Yeah, there's just one more. How long can a CubeSat stay up in orbit?
So that's a good question, and yeah. Sorry, go on. Okay. So that's a good question because everyone wants to know, what you can do with a satellite, and a lot of that times that depends on how long you're going to be up there. So it depends on your orbit, as does a lot of things. If you're lower orbit, you might come down earlier. If you're highly elliptical, if you're experiencing a lot of drag, depending on where you're going through. So it depends is the golden answer. But to give you a little more context for that, typically mission lifetime, and I'm going to go off of Aerospace's numbers, which might be a little bit longer term than the rest of the industry. Like I said, a starting up university might be a little different. But we tend to build satellites for mission lifetime, meaning they're operational, they're doing their job, which is the next point on here, the payload or the mission. What is the specific purpose for this satellite? They're going to be doing that for 6 months to a year, depending on their orbit. Because if their orbit degrades in that time where it can no longer perform the mission, then it might be a little less. And then that's when we allow it to, kind of die if it chooses to. We design it to be perfectly functionable as best as we can for that time frame. And then if we get more than that, great, we'll use it. But we don't count on getting more than that. So, for example, AeroCube 4, we got a good 5 years out of that satellite, and that's really long in terms of CubeSat. So I'd say a year or less. Again, it depends on your orbit. Some are going to a little bit higher orbit nowadays, but it really depends on how quickly you're going to start coming down into the Earth's atmosphere and burning up. You don't have too much control over that.
That was a great answer. Thank you.
Sure. All right, so the last part here, which we just touched on, is the payload or mission. In this case, AeroCube 7 had a whole lot of different payloads, and that's what we try to do. We try to fit as much in there as we can, and you'll see some of these used in an animation I have later. Laser rangefinder, we have 2 satellites go up, so a lot of times instead of just sending 1 up, you'll send 2 up, because it doesn't cost that much more to make a spare set of parts. And then you can use them as redundancy in case one fails and the other one makes it, or you can use them to do cool maneuvers with each other, and that's what this guy wanted to do while it was in space. All right, so we're still talking about, the beginning times of the AeroCubes, or sorry, not just AeroCubes, but all CubeSats. And this is where you can kind of see our history. So back in, back in the beginning, up until this point, there was no real CubeSat standard, like I talked about before, that one unit, 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters. And so we were kind of doing our own thing, kind of making similar size stuff, but not exactly to that standard. And then CubeSat Standard came out, and we jumped on board with AeroCube 1. And in the beginning, we just wanted to prove out those main functions that I just went over. We wanted to say, we can talk to it, we can turn it, we know which way it's facing, we can do a specific mission, and we can have power for as long as we need for that mission. Meaning, batteries to run whatever stuff we have on the satellite, and then solar cells to recharge those batteries so that you don't just have one use of the battery. And here's our little AeroCube 1, and you'll see at the bottom, failed to reach orbit. Sadly, sometimes you have bad days in aerospace, and in this case, the rocket did not make it off the ground. But we moved on, and we still improved upon it, even though we didn't get data back from it, and we went to AeroCube 2. And you can see they're slightly getting more improved. AeroCube 3 here, and then over here is AeroCube 4. And the reason why I mentioned AeroCube 4 is you'll hear me say things like AeroCube 4 took this picture, and I mentioned before that it lasted 5 years, and that's really long for CubeSats. This was what I call the workhorse of our fleet so far. It really put out a lot of good data even after its mission was ended, and it can do all of those things that I described as what a satellite needs to do. So at this point, 2012, we, hit the mark. We figured out what we needed to do in order to make these CubeSats viable as options for the future instead of those big, or in addition to those big traditional satellites. And then you'll see as I go forward, AeroCube 6 is kind of our first one where, okay, we figured out how to do the basics, let's do something cool with it. And so I'll talk about AeroCube 6 later, and it's an actual science mission, not just a technology mission. All right, pop quiz time. So I'm going to be looking for your answers. Watch this video, and if you can tell me what country it is in the comments. Yes, Italy. Richard got it. First one in. So I was talking about that attitude control, and I'll play the videos through again so you can kind of see. So if you look here, you can see the boot shape of Italy, and you can see, on the map here, the boot shape of Italy. And you can see how close we still are to Earth. We're not spread out. We can't see all of Europe. So that's where that attitude knowledge, that navigational knowledge is really important, because if you don't know where you are, you might not know what you're taking a picture of. Even if you might think, well, Google Earth knows where it is. Well, it's not that simple when you come to space. It really depends on which way you're facing. All right, next question. And you guys can keep score at home if you've got a family sitting there and see who gets it right. This is another picture question. Test your geography. Where in the world is this a picture of? And I'll give you a hint since it's the first one here. This is land, this is ocean, and then these are clouds, snowstorm clouds. Anyone? New York City, Manhattan, yep. All right, looks like we got it. I said Northeast, and then the next one, which state? So you guys kind of got it, New York, New York City, New England. Yeah, exactly. So just to give everyone else out there kind of a reference here, you've got to look for these key features. So you see this here, you see this here, similar features, and then down here with New York, you can see the island here. So I like this picture in particular because some of you might be on the East Coast. This is back in 2014 when they had that snowmageddon type situation going on, and that's where you see all these cool snow clouds leaving, heading out to the Atlantic Ocean. My family lives in Maryland, and I loved seeing this picture because I was in sunny California, and I could just take pictures with these satellites of them covered in snow. All right, next question, pop quiz question. It's going to be a little blurry, but what are those things you're seeing there? What do you think that could be? You see, we kind of looked from space down on it. I'll let it run one more time. And if you know, if there's any way possible you know what area that is. All right, we got a couple of right answers. It's a lightning storm. So, yeah, and that was actually over Texas. And it's cool to kind of see it from the other side, and show you just how big those storms can be, and we can take a picture of them. We can fly over them with these small satellites, which is another great thing that CubeSats are being looked at for being used is if we have enough of them up there, and there's a severe weather event, a hurricane, tornado, could we have one fly over like this and take images and kind of get much better up-to-date information on the aftermath or predicting what will happen and, save people's lives, help people out. All right, next pop quiz. Getting a little tougher. What is this a picture of? What city is this? And while you guys kind of think about it, I like that. You overruled your son. He got one up on you there. So what city is this? It's going to be a really tough one because I definitely didn't know it. And while you guys think about that, you can kind of compare. On the left here is an image taken by a space station, really high top of the line equipment. And then on the right is something taken by one of our Cube satellites back in 2015. So even now our satellite pictures are better than even this. But yeah, it's a little blurry, but you can still see the street signs, the city lights. So you can kind of leverage now, do I need to put up something as expensive as whatever camera took this on the ISS? Or for mission, is this okay? Are we looking at traffic patterns? This might be good enough. All right, we got one thing, Brazil. Not quite. We got one more guess. Pasadena, Paris. I'm going to say you guys are a little bit off here. Not that I blame you. Kuwait City. So I didn't expect anyone to get that. If you did, you would have gotten a great big bonus point. But it's obviously a night image, with all the lights and you see the city grid there. But I also just find a lot of this imagery beautiful. So share that with you guys. All right, last one, toughest one. What is this a picture of? Where is this a picture of? To me, it looks like a bunch of paint on a canvas or something that's splattered there, dried out. I believe I'll let you know that most of it in the shot is water, and I gave away the answer, but polar caps, Antarctica, pretty close, just on the other side. It is the Yukon Delta, Alaska, and the Bering Sea. So again, knowing which way you're facing is really important because just having this image out of context, is that snow? Is that ice? Is that a cloud? It's really hard to tell if you're facing it straight on like this. So a lot of our images are also trying to figure out ways to, intuitively know with the picture, is that a cloud? Can we see through it with different spectrums, light spectrum, wave spectrums, or is it, land that we're looking at, those mountains, and it's just snow on the ground? So you guys got pretty close with the snowy places. All right, so now I'm going to go into more recent CubeSat work, and this will include, what we do at Aerospace mainly, But what we do at Aerospace can also be a reflection of what the whole industry, CubeSat industry, is working on now. So now that we've worked out that yes, you can make these as workable satellites. They can't replace every satellite up there, but they can do a lot of things. So you can see we've done a lot of things, especially recently, and in the last 18 months, we've deployed 10 satellites. So we now have 25 operational in space that we're working with, which is just a tremendous amount. And here you can see kind of the timeline. Over last year, these are what we call 1.5 unit satellites. They are basically a tissue box and a half. These are half unit satellites. So together they would equal 1 full unit. And then the ones over here that you can see, we're getting a little bit bigger with some of these. They're 3 units long. So this is the one I referenced before, ISARA. And then over on the right are some of our newer ones, AeroCube 14, 12, 11, and then daily. I'm mentioning those because I worked on those. I was a primary mechanical on those, so I've got to point those out. They're my babies. So these ones here on the right are ones that are going to be going up this year. All right, so AeroCube 4 I mentioned before is a workhorse, and it really did a lot of things for us. And one of the things it did was, was to show how to bring these things down. So just like you want to take care of your environment here on Earth, and you don't want to litter, leave things out to destroy the environment or make it less pleasant for someone else to be there, we don't want to litter in space either. So we all share space, every country, every person that wants to go up there. And so if we leave these satellites up there to kind of naturally fall back to Earth, it can take a while, and that can kind of take up space for someone else. So at the end of AeroCube 4's life, we decided to try out this. What they developed was this parachute. So you can see AeroCube, the Earth spinning, there's the sun, we're going around, and then this here will kind of come better into frame. Looks like a little silk sheet, and it is actually a little parachute. So even though we're in space in low Earth orbit, we still get some drag. And what that means is that with this parachute, you can see it here coming into view. It kind of looks like a cone. It is kind of a cone, but it still works in a similar way a parachute would be if you're skydiving. So it just slows you down. It's much wider, it's a bigger cross-sectional area than the CubeSat. So the goal is to bring down these satellites faster so that when they're dead and they're no longer usable, and we call them kind of bricks flying in space, there's nothing you can do with them, you can't talk to them, they can't run experiments, well, then we don't need them taking up that space that someone else could be using. So we want to bring them down quickly, and by bring them down, I mean have them burn up in the atmosphere. None of these guys come back to us after their life is over. All right, now I'm talking about AeroCube 6, and this is one I pointed out before, the small guy. You can see our scale tissue box here. This guy's a little more than half the size of the tissue box, but this is one of our first ones that we really did science with, which was great because we had these what are called radiation dosimeters. Basically, it's a fancy word for saying that they measure the amount of radiation satellite is seeing. So first, it's a new technology. We tested that out. Great. It worked. And then what we could do is, because these guys are so cheap, we can send them through these higher radiation areas that could damage the satellite, and that's okay because they're so much cheaper. If it was a $1 billion satellite, we don't want to send it and know that it's going to get damaged because that's a waste of time and money. But in this case, we can do that. And so they actually flew around. There was 2 of them, a pair, and what they could do is one would fly and then the next one would fly, which is something that you don't really want to do with those expensive satellites also because it's way too expensive to send 2 satellites up of the same thing. But in CubeSats, you can. And so what you can do is this one goes to the orbit, this one follows. And what's great about that is you can say, okay, the reading I got on satellite A at this point was X. What did I get on satellite B at that point? And that helps you determine, did that data come, is that real data? Is it noise? Because you always kind of get some background noise. That maybe is not what you're looking for and can throw off your results. Is that radiation reading time variant, or is it spatially variant? No, is it just at that point over the Earth? And so this is a great way to get these confirmation of your data rather than just getting one point of validation. And there's you can look this guy up online. They publish a bunch of presentations and papers on it. This is going back to AeroCube 7 that I broke out before, the different subsystems. You can see here internally we've got a whole bunch more stuff. And I'm going to show you guys now a little video that will better explain what this guy is doing up there. So this animation was provided by NASA because this was a grant provided by NASA. So what you're seeing here is the Cygnus resupply to the ISS. It'll, at the end of its mission to the ISS, the astronauts will put a whole bunch of trash on it, and then it'll release from the space station and then deploy us right here. These are the 2 satellites, as you saw in the first video I showed, to kind of just pop out. Sorry about that. So then I was talking about before, attitude, they need to be able to turn. So this is what this guy's doing here, turning, getting into position that we want them in relation to each other as well as in relation to the Earth. And then it's going to open those wings to get to charge up its batteries. And by the way, those maneuvering are done without the propulsion system I talked about before, just those reaction wheels and torque rods. And this is the coast, west coast, where we are here. And then this one's mission, I mentioned there are different ways to communicate, has a laser communication on it. So that's what you see there, little beams going back and forth. And I did mention this one does have a propulsion system, so you can see how we're bringing one satellite closer to the one and then stopping. And that's what we want to use as well, the propulsion system, variable drag, to show that you can move these satellites in relation to each other. And this is what we ended up performing was you have one satellite going on the orbit and the other one is circling around it as it goes. There's a lot of talk about putting up huge constellations of these satellites, and when you do that, you need to make sure that they're not going to bump into each other. So this was a test out, initial test a couple years ago, showing how that's possible in these small CubeSats. All right, and then this is just some great pictures of other stuff we've been working on recently from that large satellite with the big array that kind of popped up. It got all these pictures as well. So you can see we've got visible light here. I'm not going to quote which city is which because I'm not quite sure, but there's also different wavelengths, so we can look at shortwave infrared, we can do long wave infrared, and then we compare it to Google Earth. We can say, hey, is this lining up kind of like what I did in the beginning? You see the curve of the coast, see the curve of the coast, and this is just a test out to show that you can get really high resolution images in all these different wavelengths on this small satellite. And I also like this one, the long wave infrared, because it just kind of looks like it's all lava, and I just thought that was kind of cool. Again, you need context or else you might think that was lava, and it's actually showing the ocean there compared to the coastline. All right, so to wrap it up, I'm going to talk about how you get these satellites into space and how we actually use them and talk to them. So back in the day, some of the students out there might not remember the space shuttle, but we used off of the space shuttle in the beginning, and you can see here down in this first image on the left, that's our little pod compared to the whole space shuttle, and then a little more close-up view, and then this is right after it deploys. So the door is opened, and look, it's just a box with a spring in the back, and they open the door, with a latch remotely, and then the spring pushes this guy straight out. So you see how small we are, and it's pretty simple, and this is obviously an old picture from 2011, and we no longer use the space shuttle, so we had to find a different way to get up. And by we, I just mean CubeSat in general. Aerospace uses space shuttle, but that was special to us. Others had other ways of going up there, and that's kind of what we're going into now. So like we hitched a ride on the space shuttle, they weren't setting up a whole shuttle mission just for our small satellite. They were doing something else, and they said, yeah, we've got a little bit of room, you guys can come along. We do the same thing nowadays with rockets that are putting up satellites and ISS resupply missions like you saw in that little video I showed. Basically, we tack onto the side in a spot that isn't going to bother them. The mast isn't going to be set off its center or where it needs to be for the rocket. And then once that rocket goes up into space and deploys the satellite that it's the main satellite into the orbit it wants to go, then we kind of shoot out the side out of those little pods like you saw. Same thing for the resupply to the space station. But recently, there have been some companies that are looking at and developing rockets just for small satellites like CubeSats. So CubeSats are specifically these little 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters tissue box, but there are also satellites that are still relatively small, might be the small size of your carry-on luggage or something like that. And they're still not big enough to really warrant the cost of having their very own rocket. So what we do is kind of like a share ride program where you get a whole bunch of different satellites put on one rocket that's dedicated just to small satellites. And everyone kind of shares the cost to go up together. And what's great about that is you can launch these more often. They don't cost as much and can pick your orbits much better. Before, we kind of just had to take whatever orbit the main payload of that rocket was going to and deal with it and hope that our mission lined up with that orbit. Nowadays, we can kind of get more tailored orbits. So I'm just going to show you a quick video from Rocket Lab. And this is the Electron rocket that they've developed, and we've flown off of one of them. Our AeroCube 11 went off of one of their rockets. Now, I do have a quick question for you guys because I've been talking at you for a while. Here you see, this is their launch facilities in New Zealand, and it's a beautiful location on the craggy rocks there over the ocean. Why is it that we in America and most of the rest of the world try to launch near oceans? Why do you think that is? Besides it being, all beautiful and makes great pictures and scenery, why do we want to deploy over oceans? We've got East Coast deploy facilities, we've got West Coast, but we don't have anything in, in Ohio that's going up. Yeah, so yeah, you guys are all getting it right. It's for safety. If something was to go wrong, it's in the rocket, explodes, it doesn't quite make it to orbit, something like that, it's going to land in the ocean. It's not going to land on someone's house. So that's why in America we're really lucky. We've got a West Coast and an East Coast, and even Alaska, we've got coasts up there as well. So we can really, pick and choose where we want to launch and still keep people safe. All right, so I'll let this run a little bit. It's kind of hard to see here by scale, but this is a lot smaller than what you see like a Falcon 9 or something like that. And then here's a good shot of this, they're calling it their payload, which is just one small satellite, but this could be in the future made up of a whole bunch of small CubeSats, that type of thing. And then now you're in your orbit, and it's a specialized orbit for you and whoever else goes up with you on that rocket. So that's a great new and up-and-coming kind of venture class, they call them, small satellite-specific rockets. And actually what's cool is if you go on the website, and you guys can go on this, I think SpaceX does it as well for some of their Falcon 9 launches that do this, but I know Electron does it, and it's kind of like shopping for your seat on a plane, your plane ticket. You say, hey, I want this date, and it takes you to that rocket and says, okay, these seats are open, and it fits a 1U CubeSat, or it fits a 6U CubeSat. And you can kind of pick, and then, of course, the bill is much higher than your plane ticket. But it works very much the same way, which is kind of odd when you think about space. It just shows you how accessible space has become with these small satellites. All right, and last thing is our ground stations. We've got to be able to talk to the satellites. So we have dishes here on Earth that when the satellites pass over them and we're within their communication devices, can to them. So by that we mean we can upload, programs, we can fix bugs in the software. We can tell it, hey, next time you're over Paris, take a picture. And we can also download any information or data that they've taken, while they've been up there. A lot of it's automated now, which is great. We don't have to have someone show up in the late hours of the night because the satellite doesn't care about, your work sleep schedule. It just says, I'm going to be over the station at 2 a.m. Do you want to talk to me then? So a lot of it's automated. At Aerospace, we've got quite a good little ground station network here. We've got one in Florida, Texas, Minnesota, California here, and in Hawaii. And those all are RF communications, but we also have what's called optical communication. So that little video I showed you where you saw the laser beam kind of beaming down to California, that's at Mount Wilson. And also we have one at a facility here in El Segundo, which I'll show you next. This is our cool receiver and communicator here. And then you see this nice dome on Mount Wilson, and we have the same thing on top of our A6 building in El Segundo. And this is how we communicate with the laser. The laser is, an order of magnitude faster than using just a regular RF antenna, which is great. You think, why wouldn't we use that all the time? With a lot of those videos you saw from us, they were actually just a series of pictures taken really quickly, and we stitched it together to make it look like a video. But that's because with the RF communication, the downlink time is pretty slow, so you can't afford to really take down a video. It could take weeks, months to really download all that data for a video, but you can do pictures pretty, easily. But with the laser communication, that lets us get a whole bunch more data down a lot more quickly. And so we can do things like videos. We can take really high resolution images. We can get a whole bunch of data from whatever science equipment we have on board. But there's one problem with the laser. If you got clouds, you can't talk to it. So that's why when you advance the technology and learn new things about different areas, it's not always, obviously do the next best thing. There are always going to be trade-offs. So luckily in California, we don't have clouds all that often, but unfortunately, the first time we sent up a laser communication for testing, we just happened to have 2 weeks of clouds. So customer kept coming to us and saying, how'd that laser work out? We're like, we're still cloudy. We can't talk to it. So that's why maybe if you're trying to talk to a place that is stormy all the time, that's not a great option. But if you're talking to a place like Southern California, for most of the year, that's a fine option to use. So yeah, it's a cool thing, and I like to be able to say we have lasers on our satellites. All right, so Lauren, I don't know how much time we have left, but I'll just open the floor for questions at this point. So thank you all for listening. It's been a pleasure. Wish I could see you guys in person, but this is the next best thing. So let me know if you guys have any questions.
We have a few questions. How do small CubeSat cameras compare to the larger satellite cameras?
That's a great question because we've talked over and over again about, cost. Cameras can be really expensive. And another thing with cost is weight, mass. Cameras tend to have glass in them, and they tend to be pretty heavy. So we didn't want to have it take up our whole mass and the whole volume of our satellite. Some of those pictures you've seen are most of them are just off-the-shelf cameras. I bought them from a company, and they shipped them to me, $60 for a lens, that type of thing, which is not a lot. So as, think about your phones. The first time there was a camera on a phone, it was, you took a picture, is that a human face? Yeah, I think so. And nowadays we're taking these high-res, depth of field pictures on our smartphones with multiple lenses and cameras. So as that technology type of thing moves forward, we can take advantage of that. We can get better things much smaller. They're not made for space, but we can either kind of try to figure out a way to make them a little more robust for space where they can withstand that environment, or we just kind of say, hey, let's see if it works. So compared to the bigger satellites and the traditional ones, if their mission is to have a really good camera, we're not going to beat that. There's no way. But as you saw with that picture of Kuwait City versus ISS, we were much, orders of magnitude cheaper for that camera, and we got a pretty close resolution image. And that image was from, I think, 2015. So in just the last, 5 years, how much better it's become. And you can see, if I can go back to those pictures from my SAR, this one, you can see that this is our visible here, so like what you would take just with a regular camera. And you can see like all the little streets and everything. And this was these are kind of weather cameras that we're testing out in the different wavelengths. But we can still get really good images with, I think this one is, the size of, what's a good cards or something a little bit smaller than that, a little thicker than that, but not as wide. And so it really depends on what your mission is, to answer your question. Comparing to the traditional or the really big, high expensive ones, we're not going to beat them if it's just a camera mission, taking pictures. But if you don't need to see, what someone's car is, and this is all you need for your data, then this is good enough, and it's going to be a lot cheaper and a lot easier to get the data you want.
Right. How many CubeSats comprise a set, and is a set considered a constellation?
So for our company, we typically do a set like of 2, and then we'll have a third one that we call an engineering unit. So that one is a backup, but it also is what we do to like make sure everything fits, test stuff out on, and then the other 2 are the flight ones that we handle a little bit more carefully and do everything kind of perfectly, whereas the other one is kind of our test unit. So typically for us, we send up 2 for redundancy, and then if we have maneuvers like that where we need to talk between the satellites for an experiment, you obviously need 2 for that. They're not considered constellations. I don't know at what point, if it's a number that makes it a group of satellites a constellation, but typically when we're talking about constellations, it can be a small number, a handful to thousands. Some people are talking about putting up there, and those are more constellations because their job is to work with each other. They might be a communication network or something where, as I was showing you those ground stations, you can only communicate with it when it's over you. So as soon as it passes, you need to have the next satellite coming up if you want to keep that communication network. And that's where they're really looking for constellations. So since constellations are still pretty new and being explored, I don't think there's too many set definitions of this number is constellation. This is what you mean when you say constellation. So it's still kind of up in the air, but there's definitely a lot of people that want to put up these like kind of networks up there, which will be great because you could get internet to places that never had internet. You could, be great for watching over the ocean. If someone has a distress mayday signal in the middle of the Pacific, and you've got satellites overhead, you can pinpoint their position and get help to them much more quickly, rather than just using, the standard old satellite transmission. So not really a good way to answer your question, but that's kind of the best I can provide at this point.
Well, Jackie,
and yes, like the SpaceX Starlink. Yes.
I was just going to interrupt and sorry for that. We want to thank you everyone for joining us today and for being such active participants. We really do appreciate that. And then a big thank you to you, Jackie, for taking time out to be with us today. And for all of our aerospace employees, you're welcome to enter this time into the TLC as an external learning credit. And you can do that by visiting the TLC website. And this session is being recorded. I know we had some questions about that. It'll be available on our AU STEM Talks website and also on our Aerospace Corporation YouTube channel. We want to continue to bring you STEM Talks. So if you have any ideas for presentations you would like to propose, please contact us. And we thank you again for joining us today. And keep an eye out for next week's talk. We will be having Christine Black join us, and she'll be talking to us about stellar evolution. And we hope to see you again. Thank you again.